Grief doesn't just come when someone dies. If you grew up with childhood trauma, grief hits when you realize the life you needed as a kid, maybe more safety, more love, more protection, never happened. And that loss can feel like you're dying sometimes because it's invisible and almost no one around us even sees it. And that's what makes it so hard is you can be moving along in your life, functioning, and then out of nowhere, you see something that reminds you. Someone with, that kind of mom who calls just to check in on them, or a father who shows up for his kid's graduation, or a partner who feels steady and dependable. And that's when it hits you, that gap between what you should have had and what you actually got. That's grief. Not the kind that people send flowers for, but the grief of a life that whole parts of what you're capable of, never got developed because you were a kid and no one gave you what you needed for it to develop naturally. And it does hurt, I know. It can knock the wind out of you. But here's the thing. Feeling that grief is not the end of your story. It can be the start of your freedom. Grieving what you didn't get is brutal because it's not like one big loss that you can point to. It's 1,000 small losses, really. They just stack up day after day. Maybe no one taught you basic life skills. So when other people were learning how to drive or how to apply for college or manage money, you were just winging it. And maybe you never had someone cheering you on. So when you accomplish something today, it feels flat, like whatever you do, it just doesn't count. Or maybe you grew up in chaos, and now when you see other people with stable, healthy families, it hurts that, you're thinking, oh, that could have been me if someone had just done their job when I was a kid. That recognition is painful, and grief can feel bottomless because the losses keep showing up in adult life, in relationships, at work, in your health, in the way you isolate, if you haven't yet healed your trauma. The symptoms have a way of just rolling on and on. And yes, grief can tip into self-pity or rumination. And your mind, it grabs onto painful thoughts and replays them until you're exhausted. It's not because you're weak. It's because old pain, once it's triggered, can hijack your attention. So when grief comes, the challenge isn't to be above it. The challenge is to feel it without letting it run your decisions. Decisions like isolating, lashing out, or giving up. That's where the work is. So I got my heart broken once. Actually, my heart's been broken a few times. But this one time, it hit me so hard. It's such a loss. And I remember asking the guy, why? And he said basically that I had pushed too hard. And there was no room for the relationship to develop and reveal itself. And I was trying to rush it along, and I didn't seem to sense or care about him. And that, to me, that just seemed like, of course I did. I did care. It seemed to him like everything was about my agenda, and it was a turnoff. And at the time, I just thought he was wrong and that he had made a mistake. And that first wave of grief was just the loss of him, of the future I'd envisioned, of the way that I was around him. But it was years later when I was thinking about this and when I had learned how all the abuse and neglect in my childhood had really done a number on my heart, on my thinking. And I saw how, back then during that particular breakup, I couldn't even imagine that someone would like me enough to come forward to me if I didn't make it happen. I couldn't imagine that somebody would put in at least half of the effort for a relationship to form. I thought if I didn't push for what I wanted in every part of my life, relationships, work, everything, I thought I would get nothing. And that is a childhood trauma wound from being neglected physically and emotionally and socially. Nobody did come to meet me a lot of the time. I was left on my own to deal with my emotions and pain and hardships as a kid. I definitely wasn't taught how to date, talk about winging it. And it hit me, this wall of the real grief of how I was basically raised feral. My mom was always drunk. My dad was in another state. And then when I was 15, he died. And my trauma-driven survival strategies that I was still holding on to made it impossible for me to avoid messing up relationships and opportunities. That was when I cried. Letting myself imagine for just a minute what life could have been like if my parents had been sober, and if they had stayed alive, and if they had stayed together, and if they had guided me in the ordinary ways that parents guide their kids, I'd have felt safe and loved in the world. I would approach dating as a way of getting to know someone and not just, making that person into my personal life raft. Wish I hadn't done that. And that's yet another kind of grief. I blew it. I've known every kind of grief, but here's what I know about this kind. When you feel the gravity of what you lost, what you never had, this kind of grief doesn't resolve by ignoring it, and it doesn't resolve just by talking about it. If you push it down, it comes out sideways in anger, guilt trips, in choices that hurt you, in relationships that drain you. And yet, if you talk about it endlessly, it can turn into a loop. You get temporary relief, maybe, but nothing changes. And so the way through is to recognize grief for what it is, a signal. It's pointing right at the places where you were left without what you needed and where you now have the chance to build something different. So you can think of grief not as a weight, but as a map. And here is what you need in your life. When grief for the life that you didn't get feels overwhelming, there are ways to work with it so that doesn't swallow your whole day. Now, you know me, I'm all about pen and paper or even a journal. And what I want you to do is just, get something to write on and name it. Write it down, what you lost. Instead of carrying a vague heaviness, say it straight. I didn't get a safe home. I didn't have support to try new things. Or I didn't have someone protecting me from dangerous people. When you name it, it stops being a foggy thing. It becomes something real that you can acknowledge and begin to move through. Second, notice where grief is leaking into your present time. Does it show up when you avoid people who care about you? When you downplay your accomplishments? When you shut down or get negative in relationships because you're convinced the relationship's going to fail no matter what you do? Spotting where your grief is steering your behavior gives you a chance to interrupt the pattern. All right, third, take an action that builds what was missing. If you grew up without encouragement, invite a friend to celebrate an accomplishment with you. It doesn't have to be a big thing, just a cup of tea together where you clink your cups and you say, well done. You acknowledge the accomplishment. Now, if you grew up without stability, set up one tiny routine, like a regular bedtime or a morning walk. These aren't fixes for the past, but they are bricks in building a life with the structure that you've always craved. Structure is your friend when you've had trauma. Structure helps you stick to guidelines, even when you're sleepy, even when you're not really thinking about it, and definitely when pain comes up and dysregulation and starts to feel like a little tsunami that's going to throw you off your path. All right, fourth, break the pull toward isolation. Grief makes you want to disappear, to stay out of sight, but isolation deepens the ache. So take a step toward connection, answer a text, make a phone call, sit with people at a meeting or a group. Connection, even in small doses, makes grief easier to carry. Now, connecting with people can be very tricky for those of us who grew up with trauma. And if you think that may be what's going on with you, that past trauma is affecting your ability to connect, I have a quiz you can take. It lists a series of signs that early trauma is in fact affecting you in that way. And I'll put a link to that free download in the first line of the description section below this video, so you can find it there. All right, fifth, give grief a boundary. You don't need to grieve all day. Set aside a time, maybe 10 minutes in the evening. This is very good after breakups, by the way. You just don't think about it. Give yourself a time. Now you get to think about it. Let yourself feel it, write about it, cry if you need to, and then give yourself permission to step back into the rest of your life. And this way, grief has a place, but it doesn't just take over everything. Sixth, watch for covert avoidance. Sometimes feeling sad and empty inside, which can be how grief feels, gives you the urge to overwork, overhelp, scroll endlessly, binge on TV, anything to stay one step ahead of the sadness. But avoidance doesn't heal it. Pay attention when your distractions become constant. Like a little distraction is a lovely thing, but if it's all the time, that's usually a sign that you're trying to outrun your grief. And it doesn't feel good, does it? What doesn't feel good probably isn't good. This kind of grief is tricky because it doesn't always knock you flat or justify time off from work the way the loss of a family member would do. It's more of a haunting sadness. It's like a wave that comes out of nowhere, and it leaves you with that heavy thought, I should have had more than this. I needed more than I got. And it's hard to carry because it doesn't have an end point. There's no funeral, no set time when people gather around you with casseroles and sympathy cards. This grief is invisible. It just comes up when you least expect it, at work, at a family gathering, when you see someone else getting what you never had. And that's why it can mess with your functioning. You can be moving along fine, and then a wave hits and suddenly you can't focus. You can't enjoy yourself. You don't feel like showing up. And all around you are little reminders of what you don't have. And if you don't work with grief when it shows up, it doesn't just vanish. It tends to show up in other ways, lashing out at people who care about you, numbing out with food or screens, or cutting yourself off from relationships. That's the real cost of unprocessed grief. Grief for the life you didn't get can feel pointless, right? Like just another punishment on top of everything else. But it's not pointless. It's real, and it's showing you where the holes are. So that sadness you feel rises in the very places where something was missing. It shows you the edges of what you needed and you didn't get, not then. And for some people, that might be a longing for family closeness. And the grief cuts deepest when you see other people with that bond. And, you try to tell them, my family didn't have that. They never understand, do they? I know. I totally know. For others, it might be, when they hear somebody receiving encouragement. Every time you achieve something, instead of joy, there's that pang. Why does this feel empty? Or it might be stability. When things around you shift, you feel shaky in a way that goes beyond the situation. That's the honest part of grief. It lays bare the gaps. And once you see the gaps, you're not powerless anymore. You can start to build into them one step at a time, not to erase the grief, but to live differently going forward. So instead of thinking of grief as proof that you'll never catch up, see it as proof that you're alive to what matters. The numbness is gone. You can feel. And if you can feel, you can choose what to do next. Now, the thing that helped me process my grief and not be pulled down by a hypothetical version of my life that in reality never existed was my daily practice. And these are the twin techniques: a specific form of writing to release stuck thoughts and emotion, and a simple form of meditation that allows me every day to process and recover and rest from that storm that used to just rage in my emotions, draining me. My daily practice gives a healthy release to that and leaves nice, fresh mental and emotional space to have new ideas and new experiences to enjoy present time and to build the life I want. And I'm happy to share those techniques with you. I've got a free course that you can access right now. If you take the course, you can come to free calls with me and my team every week, and we'll do the techniques with you, and I take questions. It's called the Daily Practice, and I'll put a second line in the description section below where you can click on that and take the course right away. It's just like that. You'll know how to do this technique in less than an hour. If you're grieving the life that you didn't get, I want you to know it's okay. It means you're awake to what happened and you're carrying the feelings that come with it. That grief may never disappear completely, but it doesn't have to rule your life. You can feel it and still move forward. You can build pieces of what was missing: connection, people you trust, stability, love and encouragement, money. Even if you start small, and every time you take one of those steps, you're no longer just surviving the past. You're creating a different future. Everything about your healing depends on this shift. So when grief comes, let it come. Say hello to it. Don't fight it, and don't let it dictate what you do next. Keep going. Keep building, because what you didn't get back then, you can begin to create now. And I'm here to tell you, it is a good life. If you like this video, I've got one that you're going to love right here, and I'll see you very soon. If you keep using isolation to manage your CPTSD triggers, just about every option in your life will gradually close off to you.